Hello everyone, welcome to FE Learning. My name is Rabyalam and today I am going to talk about allowable sprinkler omission location in concealed space as per NFPA 13 section 9.2. So let's start now. A common question always comes in discussion about the installation of sprinkler system and where a sprinkler should be located has to do with non-consumable concealed space, right? So NFPA 13 permits sprinklers to be omitted from concealed space that are formed by non-combustible or limited combustible materials provided that they have minimum combustible loading, right? So mostly non-combustible and limited combustible, those are the definition we have in the definition chapter of NFPA 13, and they have taken this one from NFPA 5000. So I will just try to explain these two points, non-combustible and limited combustible. Next slide, right? So in a concealed space, without a sprinkler, the floor, ceiling, wall, structural element of the space must be constructed with non-combustible or limited combustible materials, right? This does not prohibit other combustible from being in the space as long as they do not make up the floor, ceiling, wall or any structural element and are not of such a quantity that they can no longer be considered minimal, right, to the ASA or authorities having jurisdiction. So here is the requirement of NFPA 9.2.1, which covers the concealed space not requiring sprinkler protection, right? So total of 18 sections, 18 subsections are there, which we will focus now one by one. 9.2.1.1 talks about the concealed space of non-combustible and limited combustible construction with minimum combustible loading having no access not require sprinkler protection, right? So it must be a non-combustible construction or limited combustible construction with minimum combustible loading, right? So when you talk about the minimum combustible loading, we are talking about some of the conduit, utilities line, cable and all those that passes through the concealed space, right? So what is the non-combustible materials? It's for the floor, ceiling, wall and structural member: steel, concrete, masonry and glass. So these are the non-combustible materials. And 92111 also says that the space shall be considered a concealed space even with a small openings such as those used as return air for a plenum, right? So for the plenum, for the HVAC units also we can consider that one. Okay, so as I said, non-combustible materials and limited combustible materials. So those definitions are here in section 4.10.1.1 of NFPA 13. So a material that comply of any of the following shall be considered as non-combustible materials. So the first point talks about the non-combustible material. The material will not ignite, burn, support combustion or release flammable vapors when subjected to fire or heat. And the second talks about it should be as per ASTM E136, which is a standard test method for behavior of material in a vertical tube furnace at 750 degrees Celsius. So these are the pass-fail criteria of ASTM E136 when tested in accordance with the test method and procedure like in ASTM A2652, which is a standard test method for behavior of material in a tube furnace with a cone-shaped airflow stabilizer. So these are the standards under which this kind of the material need to be tested. As I discussed in the previous slide, steel, concrete, masonry and glass are an example of non-combustible material. Okay, now let's come to the limited combustible material. So there are the points for the limited materials, right? The first one, the material does not comply with the requirement for a non-combustible material in accordance with 410.1. So the one we discussed in this slide, it must be as for that one. And the material in the form it is used exhibit a potential heat value not exceeding 3500 British thermal unit per pound or 8141 kilojoule per kilogram when tested as for NFPA 259, right? So these are the point taken from NFPA 5000 section 7.1.4.2. If you found something like this one in the bracket with some code, it means this material are taken from some other NFPA code, right? So now the first point we talk about the concealed space regarding it should be a non-combustible materials or limited combustible construction with minimum combustible loading. Combustible loading means the utilities line, conduit, cable and all passing through those areas, right? Okay, so 9212 talks about the concealed space of non-combustible and limited combustible construction with limited access, right? And not permitting occupancy or storage of combustibles and not require protection. So if your room, this area is a concealed space, they have limited access and there is no storage of any combustible material in that, doesn't require sprinkler protection. 9213 talks about the concealed space. This is the point number 3 under 9.2.1. Concealed space formed by stud or joist, something like this construction, with less than 6 inches between the inside or near edge of the studs or joints shall not require sprinkler protection. So, if the distance between the bottom and the top of this joist is less than 6 inch or 150 mm, we don't need its sprinkler system. But you can see after these areas, the less than 6 inch we comply. But after that, the distance between these two open joists is increasing, right? So in those areas, we need a sprinkler system. So if we say first sprinkler we install here, where it is more than 6 inch, right, at this location, the sprinkler should cover at least half the listing up to this point. So if your sprinkler is going to cover 4.6 listing, it need to be provided at least 2.3 to this side, right, as for the installation requirement. Okay, point number 4 talks about concealed space formed by bar joists with less than 6 inches between the roof or floor, deck and ceiling shall not require sprinkler protection, right? So this is the ceiling and this is the bar joist, right? And the distance between this one at the bottom and at the bottom of the bar joist and the top of the ceiling, this one is not more than 6 inches, so we don't need a sprinkler system in such case, right? 9215 talks about concealed space formed by ceiling attached directly to or within 6 inches of wood joist or similar solid member construction shall not require a sprinkler protection. Okay. Okay, now 9216 saying that there is a figure for this one. I will just go with the figure. Concealed space formed by ceiling attached to composite wood joist construction either directly or onto metal channel. The metal channel does not exceed 1 inch in depth, provided the joist channel as measured from the top of the bat insulation, right? Mostly the bat insulation, non-combustible we can call non-combustible insulation, are separated into volume each not exceeding 4.5 cubic meter using the material equivalent to the web construction at least 3 inch of bat insulation, right? So wait a moment, we'll go directly to the figure so that we can have a look. So suppose this is one volume protected by the figure in the left. You can see here we have the gypsum board and then some of the resilient channel, right? And then we have the bat insulation. So these are the bat insulation, which is non-combustible insulation, right? So the volume of this areas, one open area cannot be more than 4.5 cubic meter, right? And it's and using material equivalent to the web construction and that is 3 inch of bat insulation. So this insulation should be at least 3 inch. So if it comply in these areas we don't need a sprinkler system as for 9216. Okay, the next point talking about 9217. Concealed space filled with non-combustible insulation shall not require a sprinkler protection. So if this complete concealed space you put non-combustible insulation, or let's say bat insulation, right? This is non-combustible insulation. We can skip the installation of the sprinkler system in that areas. One of the very common concern of that, sometimes it is easy to put insulation inside the concealed space rather than installing a sprinkler system in those areas. It is not a cost-effective solution, right? So if you can go with the insulation, non-combustible insulation, we can easily avoid the installation of a sprinkler system in those space as for 9217. 9217.1 talks about a maximum of 2-inch air gap at the top of the space shall be permitted. So this one we can go without sprinkler, without any kind of the insulation, because if you can see at this is around 2-inch of the maximum to, so fire cannot propagate apart from this. If there is a fire in this location, it cannot go after that, or it cannot go after that in case if there is such activities happening. Okay, so the next point is 9.2.1.8. 9.2.1 is saying that concealed space within wood joist construction having non-combustible insulation filling the space from the ceiling up to the bottom edge of the joist. So this is the bottom of the joist and this is the ceiling. So these are the areas if they are providing non-combustible insulation from the ceiling up to the bottom edge of the joist, we don't need sprinkler protection in these areas. 9219 saying that concealed space within composite wood joist construction having non-combustible insulation filling. So these are the non-combustible insulation filling or bat insulation, right? And the space from the ceiling up to the bottom edge of the composite wood joist of the roof from deck and with the joist channel separated into volumes. So each volume cannot be more than 4.5 cubic meters. So suppose this is a concealed space and we have from the ceiling all the way to the bottom of the wood joist we have the non-combustible insulation, and then we divide the areas by some fire stopping materials that the maximum volume of one location cannot be more than 4.5 cubic meters. So this is one, and so on. We have to distribute throughout the concealed space. The idea behind that is one point is here that if there is a fire in that location, it is not going to propagate out of this box, because this is a cutaway view of the ceiling. You can see it is closed from the top, so it is very there is very minimal chance that there will be fire propagating from one volume of 4.5 cubic meter to the another ones, right? So 9219 talks about if there is a non-combustible if there is a concealed space with composite wood joist construction, we can fill non-combustible insulation or bat insulation, and then we can segregate that areas into the volume of 4.5 cubic meter each, provided that the fire cannot propagate from one area to another area. That is 9219. The next one talks about 921.10. Right? This is a point number 10 of those 9.2.1. Concealed space over isolated small compartment shall not exceed 5.1 square meter or 55 square feet in areas shall not require sprinkler protection. So this is a complete room. Inside that we have some small compartment, right? So in that small compartment at the top we have some concealed space. So those concealed space cannot be more than 55 square feet in order to avoid the sprinkler protection at such location. Next point 92111 talks about the rigid materials. If you use the rigid material in the construction of the building, in the concealed space, and are used and the exposed surface in the form in which they are installed comply with one of the following requirement, right? So If the concealer space where rigid material are used and the exposed surface in the form in which they are installed comply with one of the following shall not require its sprinkler, right? So these are the point. The first one is the surface materials has flame spread index of 25 or less, right? So it cannot be more than 25, and the fire not to propagate fire more than 10.5 feet when tested as for ASTM E84 or UL 723. Point number second talks about the surface material comply with the requirement of ASTM E2767, that is 30-minute tunnel test to avoid, or to test those material in the rigid case. 92112 talks about the concealed space in which the exposed material are constructed entirely of fire retardant treated wood, right? So fire retardant treated wood as defined by NFPA 703 shall not require sprinkler protection. So what is NFPA 703? NFPA 703 is standard for the fire retardant treated wood and fire retardant coatings for building materials. If you can see the 3.3.2 of fire retardant treated wood of NFPA 703, what is the definition of the fire retardant treated wood? Like a wood product impregnated with chemical by a pressure process or other means during the manufacture treated to exhibit reduced surface burning characteristics and resist propagation of fire. You can see this one passed the test successfully, that this is not this is resisting the propagation of fire. And here is the some of the materials which need to be have marking, something like this one. This is one of the company which is making fire retardant treated wood, and those are the specification, and there is a marking of NFPA 703, right? So those are the requirement need to be pasted on the materials. Okay, the next one, 921.13 talks about the non-combustible concealed space having exposed combustible insulation, where the heat content of the facing and substrate of the insulation material does not exceed 1000 BTU per square feet shall not require sprinkler protection, right? And 9213 also permit the use of paper coated insulation or craft face material in a space that is otherwise defined as a non-combustible space. If you can see here regarding the craft face, it is allowed by ICC, International Code Council, in class 3, 4 and 5 types of building construction. Okay, the next one, 92114 talks about concealed space below insulation that is laid directly on the top of or within wood joist, right? So this is the concealed space, right? And that is laid directly on the top of or within the wood joist or composite wood joist. So this is the composite wood joist, and otherwise sprinkler concealed space with the ceiling attached directly to the bottom of the joist shall not require protection, shall not require the sprinkler protection. So if you can see at this image, right, this is the insulation, right? At the top we have a wood joist or composite wood joist, and that are protected by this sprinkler system. And then at the bottom of those we have non-combustible construction, non-combustible insulation, and these are the sprinkler for below the ceilings. So these areas does not require sprinkler protection as for NFPA 921.14 of NFPA 13. And then 92115 talks about the pipe chase, right? So if sprinklers shall not be required in vertical pipe chase under 10 square feet. So if the area of the pipe chase is less than 10 square feet, we do not need a sprinkler system, provided that they should meet all these two points. Point number one, pipe chase in accordance with 92115 shall contain no source of ignition. So we have to make sure there is no source of ignition in that. Point number two talks about if the building is more than 2 story, pipe penetration at each floor shall be fire stopped using material equivalent to the floor construction. So all the floor passing, we need to close this one by fire stopped materials, or let's say passive fire protection system, so that the flame cannot propagate from one floor to another floor. We know that, right? The fire can go due to the effect of the buoyancy from one floor to another floor to the upscale, and that can add fuel to the fire, right? Okay, 9 to 116 talks about the exterior columns, right? So if there is exterior columns under 10 square feet in areas formed by stud or wood joists supporting exterior canopies that are fully protected with a sprinkler system shall not require sprinkler protection. So these areas, this kind of the canopies, we don't need sprinkler protection if it is less than 10 square feet. Last two points, right? We have 2 points more. 9 to 17 talks about the concealed space formed by non-combustible or limited combustible ceiling. So which is non-combustible or limited combustible suspended ceiling from the bottom of the wood joist. So this is the suspended ceiling. It is non-combustible material or limited combustible, as we discussed in point number 1 of this one, the definition, that cannot support flame easily, and that have the insulation filling all of the gaps between the bottom of the truss or joist and where sprinkler or present in the space above the insulation. We don't need sprinkler protection in those areas. What it is talking, actually, if this is a suspended ceiling, right, and this is protected, there is a insulation, non-combustible insulation at that one, and the top parts of non-combustible insulation are protected by a sprinkler within the truss, because it is hanging, this ceiling is hanging from the roof or subfloor by support of this one, and these are the insulation. This divide the bottom parts and the top parts. So if at that area we have the sprinkler system, we don't need a sprinkler system in these areas, right? This is what they are talking. And the next point of this one, the heat content of the facing substrate and support of the insulated material shall not exceed 1000 British turbine unit per square feet. The last one of 9 to 118, right? Concealed space formed by non-combustible or limited combustible ceiling suspended from the bottom of the wood joist, right? So it is suspended from here, right? And with a maximum nominal chord of 50 mm. So it is size, this size is 50 mm, where the joists are full of non-combustible batt insulation. So in the joist, all the way from the bottom of the joist to this joist, right, it is filled with the non-combustible concealed space, and at the top we have only 2-inch open space, this one, right? And in those cases we don't need a sprinkler system at that location. So you can see here the batt insulation with facing meeting non-combustible or limited combustible criteria, they need to be wrapped around this area also, so that it cannot propagate fire from one areas to another areas, right? So that's all about the 18 point of NFPA 13 section 9.2.1 regarding the areas where we can omit the requirement of a sprinkler system. Now here we come to the end of this combustible space, but before closing that one, I want to highlight some point regarding the concealed space concern. The concern is that combustible will propagate a fire through the building, and the space allow the fire to spread throughout the building from one area to another areas. Like items like, let's say, items like wire ties or ink caps on cable trays or a few computer cables spread around in an otherwise non-combustible space are not sufficient to propagate a fire. But at the same point, a few cables become dozens and dozens can become hundreds. In that case, we may have situation where the loading can no longer be considered minimum, right? So this kind of the system requires subjective approach. Subjective approach means the one who is going for the visit of the site or planning to design a sprinkler system, he should have extensive knowledge, based on the case to case basis for the specific project to avoid any kind of the drawback in the design, and in the later stage that may encounter with the consultant approval regarding the requirement of the sprinkler system. In some buildings, in some of the buildings, cables can weigh hundreds of pounds and have ability to spread fire from a concealed space. In that instance, a sprinkler system required as per NFPA 13 above those areas. So it's again, it's like a subjective approach that one need to be decide carefully with the coordination of the ASJ and the building owner. The clear guidance on sprinkler system requirement in concealed space has been elusive. NFPA 13 technical committee, let's say, has been unable to come to a consensus on exactly where to draw the line between those space that has sufficient measurable quantities of combustible to require and those that do not, right? Therefore, every situation must be evaluated on a case by case. This is why I said need to be subjective approach for case to case, project to project, that require some extensive knowledge and experienced designer, experienced sprinkler system installer to avoid any kind of the problem regarding the fire propagation or the concealed space. Last but not the least, make it clear that if the contractors or engineers or even the supervisors are not aware of that whether they need the sprinkler system or they do not need, or they don't know what is the minimum limit we can consider minimum combustible, or more than that, they have to go to authorities having jurisdiction to decide where to install a sprinkler system or where not to install a sprinkler system. So that's all about today, and I hope you guys have got some idea about concealed space sprinkler system requirement. I know this topic is very extensive and it's like a subjective judgment, but still I try to clear some of the confusions. And if you have any comment, doubt or suggestion, you can contact me through all those channels here at the screen, LinkedIn, Facebook, or my Gmail IDs. And please subscribe my channel so that you can get the latest update on various FPA topics. So I see you next time. Take care and bye bye.